Hi everybody, this is Hero from the Birds, back with another Shadowlands video. In this video I'd like to walk you through gameplay for the Ranged Holy Paladin build. Now Ranged Holy Paladin is considered kind of a meme, and I want to dispel some of the problematic concerns people have with this build. Largely, we don't want to be at ranged as a Holy Paladin because we lose uptime on Crusader Strike, which, in addition to providing lots of great damage for our party and allowing us to be in melee to build holy power, it also facilitates a lot of the Glimmer builds, because Crusaders Might cools down Holy Shock's cooldown, allowing for us to cast many Holy Shocks. The ranged build instead focuses on healing in the traditional style of Holy Paladin, Holy Light, Flash of Light from ranged. And there are a lot of upsides to this build. It probably won't be able to help you min-max in Mythic Plus dungeons at the highest levels, but I think a lot of people are looking for examples of gameplay that offer them that traditional style. And I'll be honest guys, for most of us who are going to be doing Mythic Plus dungeons even up to the sort of mid-range tier, whatever that looks like, this build is going to perform absolutely fine. We're running Beacon of Virtue just to also show you how this synergizes with that skill, since we can't make use of Glimmer as efficiently as the Crusader Might build. We're going to be leaning a little bit more on Bestow Faith, and there's lots of really great interactions here for the Ranged Holy Paladin build that you can get used to weaving into your playstyle. Beacon of Virtue is great at the beginning of an X-Pack, in part because people have very low health pools and you take a lot more burst damage. It's interesting, this is also reflected in the later stages of an expansion when people are pushing really high keys. So I think Virtue actually has a lot of enduring power as we go through this expansion, and I just want to continue to show people real gameplay of difficult content with people who are undergeared so they can see where it shines and where it's useful. We're going to be making use, as I said, of Bestow Faith and also Holy Prism. Largely you'll want to cast Holy Prism on a target so that it splashes AoE healing to your party. Both of these skills will benefit Beacon of Virtue, and my basic advice for the ranged build is just to cast Beacon of Virtue liberally. Treat it like almost like a CD that you're just pressing. And instead of filling up our Beacon of Virtue in the melee version with Shocks, Word of Glories, and then building back with Crusader Strike to get more Word of Glories, what we're going to do is spam out either Holy Lights or Flash of Lights if you need the Holy Power really quickly, and that just allows you to still maintain Holy Power generation and top off your group. And honestly guys, it's pretty strong. You can get 3 or 4 Holy Lights off, usually around 4 casts of any kind in your GCDs at current haste levels. And the playstyle is kind of fun. It's a little more relaxing than the melee version because you can stay at ranged. You can just cast Holy Lights on your tank while you're waiting to do burst healing. You can be a little bit less worried about your Holy Shock usage because you don't have to maintain Glimmer stacks. And so you'll see me sometimes when there's a little bit of downtime just Holy Lighting my tank even though I have Holy Shock up, that sort of thing. So this is also going to make use of Divine Toll with Beacon of Virtue, which I think is an excellent combination. And that's kind of your emergency button, which I think is probably fairly useful at the beginning of an X-Pack. But I would say that those of you who have decided not to go Kyrian, which is fine, but for Holy Paladin really removes a very essential tool. But if you're not Kyrian, I wouldn't worry about it too much. You'll see in the video I'm really delaying the use of Divine Toll until it's absolutely necessary. And what that means ultimately is that I think Beacon of Virtue can carry its own weight. And if you had Venthyr and you were dropping the big AoE, you could just use it for really scary moments and trust that your Beacon of Virtue in combination with, you know, Holy Prism, in combination with Flash Heals, Shocks, Words of Glory are going to do enough AoE throughput healing to carry the day. See here, it's a fairly similar style to some of the stuff I've shown you before. you're just kind of managing health until you get to the point where you can cast Virtue again and burst heal everyone back up. That's kind of why I recommend just pressing Virtue on CD. Even when you don't feel like there's a lot of burst going on, it's a good habit to get into, and it has really, really high uptime. In dungeons, of course, especially as we get into Prideful, mana will largely not be an issue, and so that's something I'm also tracking. And here, you get down around 60% sometimes, but other than that, there's not any major issues. I think at different points, I will pull up the charts to just take a look at what kind of breakdown we have going on, so I'll comment on that as we're going. My focus when I'm going into any given pull is to make sure my tank is okay, so I'm either bombing Holy Lights, you can see here the breakdown, a lot of Holy Light, excuse me, in that boss. And other than that, Bestow Faith, combining it with Virtue, just making sure that combination is always on the go is great. If there's a real emergency, you want to Virtue into Toll, and you can afford to kind of hold off on pressing Toll unless it's really dire until you get Virtue, because Virtue is a guaranteed full group top off every time with 5 Holy Power to boot, whereas just Toll by itself will not always get your party all the way there. I think there's a good example where I can tell you about the differences between the two. So I think I Toll here actually. Yeah, you can see right there. I press Toll, and nowhere near as effective as actually hitting Toll alongside Beacon of Virtue. So you would have a similar outcome if you were playing with Glimmer, meaning that Glimmer alongside Toll does top the group fairly well also, because that one Glimmer tick hits all the targets. So here, one of the advantages of doing the ranged build actually, as opposed to doing a melee build, is you'll have a lot better tank healing throughput alongside Beacon of Virtue, so you kind of get a little bit of the best of both worlds. Sometimes when you're doing the melee build, your priority is to build Holy Power, so Crusader Strike does 0 healing, whereas if you're just casting Holy Lights as a filler, that's a nice meaty heal that's going to help stabilize your tank. So there are, I guess I'm running into a wall here, there are some useful things that set apart the ranged build from the melee build. Here's a good example of Haywire. So here's a really high burst moment, and we'll just probably end up using Toll here. You can see it works right alongside Beacon of Virtue, just as with all the other builds. It's again why I recommend Kyrian, just to get out of jail free card. And I know that people are going to talk about how things like Virtue are a bit of a crutch, and I completely understand that sentiment. But one of the things that we need to get away from is the elitism that suggests that we all can perform every build completely to specs, and people just need to learn how to play it, and they're just bad if they can't do the melee build. I don't believe that at all. I think people have really different interests and styles as far as playing their character, and this build doesn't really perform that much different than your melee build. It has all the right kind of burst tools you need, and honestly, people make mistakes. So I'm trying to show you a build that is practical, meaning that if your skill level is not like a mythic first raider, or you can't push the highest plus 20 keys, this is a build that is reasonable and it offers you recovery tools. So when people make mistakes, you have a couple of GCDs that can help top everybody off. And at ranged, it's quite reasonable. You see here I'm just filling with Holy Lights as we work into any major combat, and we're going to Virtue in between. Personally, I find this a lot more relaxing than the melee build, because having to focus on going back and forth between Holy Shocks and Crusader Strike is a bit of a drain on the brain, and it's a fun one that I enjoy, and I'll likely continue to play Melee Paladin as well, but this is a nice little break. So for those of you who really enjoy the ranged bombing of Holy Lights, it is satisfying and meaty, and there's lots Lots of burst here that's available. And it's just less of a stressor on your brain. As far as looking ahead to conduits and legendaries and that sort of thing, I think you'll get a lot of mileage out of the splash healing for Holy Light conduit. And Inflorescence obviously is also going to be quite good. Both halves of it actually in a dungeon setting are going to be excellent. So using Flash of Light and getting the reduction on your mana will be kind of useful in higher mythic pluses, but also just watching you bomb 2 Holy Lights into Beacon of Virtues, it'll top the entire group, guaranteed, because the splash healing that you're doing to the other members is also going to hit the beacon, so you'll kind of double dip with that conduit for Holy Light. Once it scales really high, the throughput from Holy Light is going to be actually insane. Will this be transferable into a ranged raiding build? I think probably not, and the reason for that is that Virtue on a larger group loses a bit of its utility. So you may Virtue targets that are already full, and so you lose some of the beacon value on your tanks, either if you need Faith for really high double tank damage, or if you just want to have your one tank soaking up all the heals that you do to the party. But if you like the ranged build for Holy Paladins, I think there is a place for Virtue in high burst moments, and we'll have to see how it plays out. I think you'll probably end up running out of mana, essentially, if you try to do Beacon of Virtue in a raid setting. But we'll have to see. Again, there's a lot of things that have not been uncovered yet. Maybe there's mana trinkets. By not uncovered, I mean we haven't really tested the pressure of sort of mythic raid encounters for longer than like half an hour at a time or 45 minutes. So when people talk about testing the dungeons, the encounters in Castle Nathria, I'm just a little bit dubious about the data coming out of those tests. So I'd like to test it myself. But it's pretty clear to me that Virtue is a huge mana hog, and in raids you'll likely want a kind of Glimmer setup or something a little more melee oriented. In any case, one thing I love about this ranged build is just how relaxing it is and actually how versatile it is. You can just do what I'm doing here, which is Holy Light until damage comes out, and then immediately Virtue when a couple targets take damage. You can just, look at this guy, just burst them back up. You can grab everybody you need with Virtue in a couple of GCDs. And you could do this while in melee, or you can do it just relaxing from ranged. Here, see, we just spam Holy Lights and wait, get our Virtue going. If you're in trouble outside of the Virtue window, it's no problem. Just stabilize the group until you get Virtue again. You could cast Holy Lights on off targets while you're waiting. There's no real rush, there's no real concern. Every few seconds, Virtue is going to come back and make sure that you can top your entire group. So you can just kind of think about spot healing, knowing that in that cycle of every like 10 seconds, you can definitely top your group. My favorite part of the dungeon, this is going to kill a lot of people in Mythic Plus. One thing I start to show a little bit more as we go forward is sort of movement patterns. So this is a really good example where a lot of ads get pulled in from the side. You'll want, as a healer, to have them intercepted by the tank, so you can walk right beside the tank while you're doing this. And I'd suggest, especially in dungeons, if you're going to do this ranged Holy Light build, kind of you can stutter step yourself forward past the group. You know, you have lots of instant cast spells to fill in the rotation. You can do your Bestow Faith on the go. You can do a drive-by Prism. Just getting yourself ahead to where the next pack is going to be is a really good idea, because positioning is going to be a little more significant if you want to stand and cast. whereas the melee builds can kind of go wherever they want and do whatever they like. This range build, you'll want to just make sure you're stepping up and through. I think I was just showing that I'm about 14% haste. So pretty low, but you can still get off about 4 instances. You can see here I was just choosing to build a couple more holy power to get off 1 word of glory within the Beacon of Virtue window. That's just a common feature of this build, choosing either to pump a huge heal with holy light or choosing to build a little bit of holy power if you're low on holy power. So in Mythic Plus, I think you can afford to bank a little bit of holy power on any of the builds, just because if you're going to use Virtue, you want to make sure you have 5 ready to go. It's not that worrisome that you spend a holy shock while you're already at 5, but I would encourage you to get into the habit of trying to maintain really reasonable holy power, going up and down through your Bestow Faiths and holy shocks. Here I think we grab some ads, so I'm just going to pull them through the group. Again, Beacon just helps me recover right here. Just a couple instant casts, and then we just flash up light to build back holy power. In higher haste, guys, every single Holy Paladin build will benefit. Because your holy lights, which are going to hit like trucks, can be cast, more and more of them can be cast within the Beacon of Virtue window. Imagine getting off like 4 holy lights, guys, all splashing in a raid setting. It's a significant amount of throughput healing. And we don't really need to use very many of our tools. People are starting to get some gear now, so maybe it's not too bad. But on the whole, guys, this is just a really relaxing build. I'll try to focus the rest of my comments on direct gameplay, so I can talk a little bit about what buttons I'm thinking about pressing and why this fight up here has a good amount of burst healing required, so we can chat a little bit about what to expect when it's a bit more stressful. Actually, also, the other side is a good example of a dungeon to test out for different healer builds, because the final boss has a lot of pressured needs, both burst coming out because people don't know how to do the mechanics, and split healing, so people running off into other directions so they come back to the fight already hurt. But this pull in specifically on Zayaxa was a little bit messy, so we can see what's going on here. Right, so while there's no damage going out, I'm going to prioritize Holy Lighting and then Holy Shock other targets than the tank if I can. I get the bomb, so I'm immediately thinking to myself, I want to be ready for it to go off, so I use Virtue as I'm walking out. And then I'm going to Prism or Bestow Faith. I'm trying as much as possible to get Bestow Faith timed exactly when Virtue comes on CD. They're pretty close to one another, so that when it goes off, Bestow Faith hits everybody with Beacon. One thing that's kind of unique about Bestow Faith is you can do it before combat and then Virtue, and it ticks down afterwards. So you get the holy power and you get the heal before you ever have any damage intake. So it's a nice kind of preemptory spell. It's good for recovery too. And then you just saw there the basic burst profile that's coming out, and we didn't really need to even go near Toll. As we move to the end of this video, just want to encourage you guys, try to work out things yourself. It'll help with your own gameplay if you know why something is working for a ranged build or a melee build as well. If you understand what it is that Glimmer is doing for you and where it's weak. If you just take a cookie cutter build, you'll find in those stressful GCDs, you may not know exactly what button you should be pressing and why, or what's going to be effective. You could see there from the throughput on the meters, that the beacon healing is just completely off the charts as far as throughput is concerned. And that's just been consistent for me, whether I do the Melee Paladin build or this ranged build. You just copy so much healing through that virtue window. I think people get scared of how little time there is for it to work, but I found there's more than enough time to top the group in even the more difficult content in Mythic. Here goes Muzilla. This is a great encounter to practice some of your healing because it emphasizes a little bit more of a ranged component. All of his slam stuff forces you to back off just out of range of him. So even if you're doing the melee build, you've got to weave your actions in and out. You can see here, easily able to top everyone with Virtue, and it's back on CD exactly when you need it. You can also Virtue people before you go through the portals and still grab them on the other side. I think we all went to the same one for some reason, so this fight maybe takes a little bit longer, but you'll notice in this encounter as well, as I was saying before we got up here, that there's a lot of random burst coming out. I think as people get used to this dungeon, the damage intake will go down. But for now, it's nice to just have a recovery. Oh, here he is. A recovery healer style that you can just get used to. Obviously, I'm not adding any damage as a paladin, but there are ways you can even do this if you wanted to while there's downtime. So this isn't the sort of final version of this. Even though you're playing a ranged style, you can always toss in your consecration, which is going to be the largest portion of your damage in a dungeon, the contribution from that. And that's just something you can do as a drive-by. Here you can see lots going on, so I'm just going to focus on getting my Bestow Faith out on CD. We told there to catch up. We probably didn't need to. Again, we just wait for Bestow to come around, and then we can Flash of Light or Holy Light people to just top them off. I wanted to make sure everyone else was going to that other side too. One thing that'll be interesting to see on the raid side is if there's a lot of damage going out because people are in low gear, if Bestow Faith might get a lot of value, even though it's a bit of a mana hog. I'm going to be definitely testing it out a few times. With this kind of low haste, Glimmer is a little bit dubious anyways because you can't take advantage of it as fully as you'd like to. And look, guys, Toll's back, so it's ready to go as an emergency. I still haven't hit wings yet, so we have lots of tools left over. We can just sit here and pump Holy Lights until we need to do some burst healing. Here it comes, Holy Shock. Word of Glory, Word of Glory. Everyone's fine. Fill with Bestow Faith. Toss out your Prism. If people are in trouble, Virtue and Toll. I think I throw it out here at some point. There we go. Again, I can just press this on CD, guys. It's such a low CD. Even if you don't get maximum usage out of it every single time, it'll just be back and ready to rock and roll. A lot of the beacon the beacon of light healing on a tank can be wasted, though in really high mythic pluses your tanks will take a lot of damage. But even so, you're still going to be casting on a tank. So one of the advantages of going with Beacon of Virtue as opposed to just Glimmer is the tank healing you do isn't as significant as you think, because you're going to be spending a lot of time flash healing your tank with just Glimmer going on. Here, the downtime on your beacon for your tank is sort of intermittent, and every time you have Virtue up, your tank's also going to be getting healed, because either you're plowing him with Holy Lights or Flash of Lights and healing everyone else, or you're healing up another raid member, and they're just in trouble. Hope you guys enjoyed that video. I think I'm hoping that the ranged build becomes something that folks can lean into a little bit if you do not like the style of Melee Paladin, and I'll try to put out a few more videos with other dungeons when we go back and do more mythics later on in the week with my guild, and I can show you what this style means. Hopefully for those of you who want that classic version of Holy Paladin pumping heals, you're not scared away by folks who say, if you don't take Glimmer, if you don't take Kyrian, it's over. It's not over. There's lots of options, guys. So just enjoy, and we'll see you again next time.